Hey, Steve, welcome to the podcast. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Eric. Nice to meet you.
Congratulations on a book that took a long time.
It started out it's been about 10 years actually, but it was odd because um, an illustrator in Seattle, outside of Seattle, contacted me, and he's a pretty well-known guy. He's done posters for everyone from, Nirvana and Mudhoney and Smashing Pumpkins to album art and zines, and he used to be the art director at Fantagraphics Comics too. And his name is Pat Moriarty. Well, my father's name was Pat Moriarty, and he died in like 98. So this guy, Pat Moriarty, wrote me on Facebook, goes, "Hey, this is Pat Moriarty. And I was going to do a graphic novel about the band Mudhoney, but I think your band is much more interesting. And I would like to do a graphic novel about the Gits." And I was like, well, I don't know if I can give permission for that, but sure. What do you want to do? He goes, "Well, if you write the story, I'll illustrate it." So I started writing some stories, some little stories of stuff that happened on tour. And after a while, I love the idea to have like written by Steve Moriarty, illustrated by Pat Moriarty. I just thought it'd be like people would think we're married or something.
Yeah.
And anyway, it yeah, I just couldn't write in little chunks like that. And it turned out like the story was way too much. And even picking out like 5 years of my life to write a memoir about, which is basically what it is, or 6 years, um, I couldn't condense it down into little stories and to draw, even though he did start drawing it. So I had to cut the cord and break loose and just do a full on book.
Well, and you found a great publisher, Feral House. I'm a big fan of.
Oh, good. Yeah, I was
They
too. I
they
found them, and I got a lot of rejection letters too. So
they
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 came
take
through.
on some great stories, and this is a great story, and it's a story that's worth telling because I get obviously the goal of this book is because really the shift of the attention over the 10 years since Mia's passing was more about the true crime, the mystery, all this stuff. And it was like forgotten the music that
Yeah.
was made and the story, the great stories that you tell in the book about getting to know her and all that. So I would think that when did that kind of enter your mind to say, you know what, this is important to write?
Well, I think I think what happened was was looking at kind of going back and reminiscing and listening to the old records and thinking, gosh, how, thinking about re-releasing the records because they were out of print. And it occurred to me when I went to Wikipedia that there was nothing written about the music or us as band members or as friends or even as a band. It was all about the murder, right? Mia's murder. And I just was disgusted at a certain point. I'm like, there's nothing I can find online that doesn't start out with rape and murder in the first sentence or two. And and I just wanted to reframe that narrative so that people would actually know what the band was about and the music, as opposed to like what the worst 10 years of my life was like, searching for the killer and finding him. He died of COVID, however, which was kind of a relief. So you can feel a little bit good about COVID
Yeah,
eliminating
yeah,
a
yeah. I was
monster.
just telling you, yeah, I'm recovering from it, and so are you.
Yeah.
But
A
but yeah, he
lot of
was in prison when he passed, I believe, right?
Yeah,
Because
he was well seated, well seated in prison there and somewhere in Eastern Washington. I don't care where, but I was a
yep.
witness, so I was on a witness protection project. So they had to notify me if he ever gets moved or released or paroled or dies. And I got a letter from some institutional letter saying that he had died.
Mm.
Um, but that I wanted to write something that didn't focus on that, and I didn't even want to include a single word about her death, and that's why the book ends a day before she dies, and everything is looking really great for the band and for us as people.
Yeah, and we'll get to that point of the book. Let's start in the beginning here when you first meet her. You first meet Mia while attending Ohio's Antioch College,
Yeah,
1985, right? What was your first impression of her when you saw her perform and as a person?
I just thought she was an older student. She was like 1 or 2 years ahead of me, and she was one of the first people that reached out and just said hello. And I remember, I think I put it in the book that we were at a bar and she invited me over to her table, and I hadn't met her, and she was with a girlfriend, and they were both super cute, and I was all nervous and sweaty and like, oh, these girls, and didn't really knew I didn't have a chance. But after a few drinks, I had mentioned that I was a drummer. She was an artist. She did painting, And she didn't really play music except for, with the acoustic guitar around a campfire kind of thing. Um, and So I said, yeah, well, I'm not really an artist. I'm just a drummer. And she goes, what are you talking about? You're an artist. A drummer's an artist. And it just had never occurred to me. And that was like my first impression of her, was validating what I had done my whole life and loved doing, and had never really considered an artistic endeavor. And that it just made me feel good. And so she was like that. She would point out things that made people feel good about themselves, insightful things. She was a very insightful, empathic person. She could tell if you were going through something or not. She could read your expression, people's expressions very well.
Yeah, it seemed to translate on stage too. First time you saw her perform was around 85, was it?
Shit, I don't
You're on
know.
the same bill, was it, if I recall?
I think the first time I saw her perform from the back, right? Because I was always drumming with her. Um, I think she would do a couple of acoustic, little acoustic shows where she would do her songs acoustically, and maybe I don't think I ever saw her before I joined the band, but they definitely, the couple of times that I saw her play solo with the acoustic guitar and singing, I was just, I was blown away by her voice and like her engagement with the audience, especially because she'd be super nervous, but she would playing a show, there might be 100 people out there, but every single person there would think that she was singing to them personally, because her lyrics were very universal, but she would just had a way of connecting with everyone there, and honoring their presence. And that was just, I've never seen anyone do that before,
Yeah, there are some performances on YouTube, so I was able to check those out. You can see
yeah,
it.
you can see it. Yeah, there's one great one where we're playing a place on a St. Patrick's Day show. We're dressed up in costumes, and that one's pretty telling of like the vibe. The place was completely packed, and everyone was just waiting for us to play. And St. Patrick's Day 1993, and it was you could just see her connecting with the people out there.
Yeah, yeah, just magnetic. Yeah, great stories of those early days, just hanging out with her too. Like when you came over and she's painting and she's splashing the paint, on the canvas and all. It's just, it was like somebody you wanted to be around, and you never knew what to expect. Like the story, what did she take it to she took it to some backyard, somebody's backyard where there's a cat that was buried in the
my
back.
cat,
Your cat.
I mean, it was dead.
Yeah, it was, but it was like, just for you, was it, you wanted to be around her because you never knew what was going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, but I was also afraid of her, because she was she was so unpredictable. But
Yeah.
I loved to be around her because she was so fun. And it would always be an adventure. It would be an absolute adventure if you were with her. And if you hung out with her, you were the only person in the world. It wasn't like she's gonna chat with somebody or talk to you while looking at someone else, or not sort of be present with you. She was a very present friend to have.
She was like that with all the guys in the band, you said, right? Each and every one of the guys in the band.
For the most part, at certain times, I can't really say what her relationship was with the other two guys, but I know that that we were all close, and she was close to them. But each one of us had our squabbles at times, over 7 years or 8 years that we knew each other, and longer. But I never knew her to squabble with any of us, but she had a different sort of friendship with each of us. She lived with Andy, the guitarist. They lived together in 2 or 3 different places in Seattle, and were great roommates. And I guess I lived with her at the Rat House, sort of our punk house that we had for a couple of years. But we were just friends. She was like a sister, really, pretty much.
You said she had an extroverted side and also an introverted side to her. Tremendous creative energy, but then there were her struggles with alcohol and the dyslexia. So were those the kind of things that would cause her to maybe be more isolated at times?
I don't know. I think she was just a private person in many ways, and very sensitive, and so she wouldn't subject herself to a lot of bullshit. I think she was kind, and she was just careful. She was careful about people's feelings, and that took the form of not being a social butterfly, but being a good friend.
What about her creative side? Speaking of that, her love of the blues, that's really what influenced her quite a bit, and she was able to channel that into her own style.
I would say, yeah. I mean, if you listen to the Gits music, you'll hear a lot of blues influence. And she came from the South, from Louisville, Kentucky, which is really the South, and which is just an hour and a half south of where I grew up. So it was we kind of had that in common. Like Midwesterners, I think, are known for being friendly, and Southerners are known for their hospitality. So I think she sort of embodied both of those things, but was also like ready to get the hell out of there when she could, just like I was, um, for the back, sort of less than progressive thoughts and people and music scenes and stuff. But yeah, the question was about her creative side or the blues. Well,
Yeah,
her
how that
mother
influenced her.
and father were both in the entertainment industry. Her mother was one of the first and foremost executives at Fox Television in the 80s. She was according to to Mia's brother Eric, she was the highest paid female executive at Fox for some time. And I think she was a producer, or I don't know exactly what she did there. Her father was also in radio and television, um, although he disappeared from her life early on and came back later once we were hanging out. Once I knew her, he came back and was trying to become part of her life again.
I believe
But she had that influence.
the night that the story where you're knocking on the door and she's in there and painting, and she was playing some pretty eclectic music on the turntable, right? All kinds of stuff.
What did I say in the book?
Was it Lou Reed? Maybe was on the turntable.
Yeah, she did stuff like a lot of New York stuff, like Lou Reed,
and
she loved Iggy Pop, and but she also loved hardcore bands like the Bad Brains and Poison Idea and obscure stuff that she just would hear. She didn't like pop very well, but she'd be listening to like a Billie Holiday record or Sarah Vaughan or someone like blues like Taj Mahal, or even older like Ma Rainey, like old 78s that she would find. And
the Pretenders too. That was the other one.
Pretenders, right. Yeah. Women singers, but she wasn't like a fanatic for women's music or women singing. She just appreciated good rock.
Yeah.
And good rock and roll and punk and whatever had soul, she really dug it.
And a really good painter. There's pictures in the book. This is one.
Yeah, I think yeah.
You see it.
That was about a life size painting. That was about 8 by 6 feet. That one there.
Yeah.
The painting of her relative.
Yeah. The story of the band name, the Gits, was much longer. It started out much longer than that. What's the origin of that name?
The original name, which carried on all the way to Seattle, probably 3 years of the band. The full name was The Sniveling Little Rat-Faced Gits, and that was lifted from a Monty Python episode from 1971 or something, where it's a vignette at a cocktail party, and one of the troupe is introducing his family, and his wife is stupid, fat, ugly, boring Git, and he has insipid, stupid little Git, and his son, sniveling little rat-faced Git, something like that. So he introduces himself, and that's the end of the story. And we just thought it was ridiculous. We're fans of Monty Python because of its crazy, its ridiculous sort of humor and slapstick and silliness. And so we wrote to them to ask if we could use the name, the Gits, and we didn't think they would write back. But back then, you could write a letter to someone, and they might write back. You could send it. And so we got an address from somewhere, maybe at the end of a DVD or something. I guess that was one of the VHS cassettes, and wrote to the troupe or the production company, and someone wrote back saying, "Oh yeah, no problem. Go ahead and use it. Call yourself the Gits. We don't care." So
you did write a song under the full name. It's on one of the yeah.
Our first demo, we had a song called "Sniveling Little Rat-Faced Git."
Right.
It was going to be the theme song, kind of like Descendants had a theme song, and like bands of that era would have theme songs. Minor Threat, we're just a minor threat.
This is a great story about your move to Seattle. I say that because it's not like, I'm sure people would have thought, oh, they must have moved to Seattle because that was like the hotbed of music at the time. But that wasn't the case. I mean, the year was 1989, and you decided to go to Seattle. Seattle wasn't on anyone's radar yet. So what led to you moving there instead of LA or San Fran or New York or Chicago?
We took like a compass, one of those compasses that you make with the circles with, and tried to find the point-to-point distance furthest away from Ohio as we could get, and that was Seattle.
How
besides that.
crazy. And you were like right
That
on
was
the
basically
verge
it.
of this huge
But,
music scene.
San Francisco seemed to be too expensive, and they had lived there for a while. It seemed too crazy, and Seattle just seemed more manageable. I don't know why we ended up there, really, what we did. And it happened to be, I think the first show I went to see there was at a place called the Moore Theater. It holds about 2,000 people, and it was half full or barely. And I think the bill was Soundgarden, Nirvana, and Tad. And I don't think it sold out. And it was a good show. I thought Tad was really good. The other two bands I wasn't too into at that point. Later,
Well, those early days in Seattle, if you could talk about those days, because you guys felt like outsiders because most of the bands there had grown up in Seattle. So how much of a challenge was that, and how long before you finally felt like you belonged?
yeah, if you just look at Tad, Nirvana, and Soundgarden, they were all from the area. They were all knew each other. They all rehearsed like in the same rehearsal area. So they kind of grew up. They kind of grew up together basically. Their parents lived there. Their parents were also musicians, in some cases, and one was an entertainment lawyer. So they kind of had an in, and had been in bands since high school. So when we got there, we played it sort of a different. We looked a little different because had more of a, like, I don't know, a punk look. Um we dressed more punk rock. We weren't like in Northwest. We didn't wear flannel, for example. We were more into leather and combat boots and spiky hair and stuff. And we didn't have long hair and like they did. And we thought, I guess I'll speak for myself. I thought the bands, it sounded very derivative. I thought like they either sounded like Black Sabbath or Iggy and the Stooges. And if you Mudhoney, and there was that garage rock thing, and they all kind of sounded like the Stooges to me, or like a 70s garage or 60s garage rock band. And then you got into Soundgarden and even Nirvana and some of those bands that were like slow and grudgy and kind of melodic and sounded like Black Sabbath for the most part, tuned down to D oftentimes.
Yeah,
Um,
that was the
Tad
influence.
was actually of those bands the least known and probably the most talented, and probably the guy that brought the quote grunge sound really to light in that area in Seattle. Um, Tad
Yeah,
is
Steve Turner was on this podcast because he put a great book out on the Mudhoney story.
who was that?
Steve Turner, the guitarist
Oh,
from,
Steve. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. He's a cool guy. We know Steve for a long time.
Okay, I figured as much. And yeah,
Yeah, I didn't get a book. I'll have to check it out. I'll trade him.
it's a great book. Yeah, garage rock was the thing. That was his thing.
Hmm.
That was
Talked about. Yeah.
the
I
influence.
got
Yeah.
later, I appreciated those bands more, but when you come into a scene, there's always that like everyone's about the same age. Everyone's trying to get the same gigs at the same two clubs that had live music. And they were competitions. So like they would get signed or go on a tour or something, and that would make us want to achieve that or do better. So when Nirvana and Mudhoney and Tad got back from Europe, touring Europe right around the fall when the Berlin Wall fell, I was jealous. I was like, I want to be in Berlin during the fall of the Berlin Wall playing at a party for it. So I'm going to book a tour of Europe. So 6 months later, we got our asses to Europe and toured there. So it was always like a game of catch up or cat and mouse, just kind of like who's doing this, then we want to do that. Or if we did this, other bands would want to do that. And it kind of was a healthy competition in essence.
Yeah. Steve Moriarty, drummer of the Gits, author of Mia Zapata and the Gits, the story of art, rock, and revolution. It comes
Yeah,
out tomorrow. Today's August 12th. We're recording this, so it's out tomorrow.
that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Amazon or at your local bookstore. Hopefully people will order it from bookstores or record stores, and maybe they'll get a second copy in stores for people that way.
well worth the read. And
Yeah.
with the success of Pearl Jam and Nirvana and Soundgarden, the Seattle bands, they're getting signed left and right, but the Gits didn't get signed. A big part of that was, you say, simply because fronted by a female. The labels didn't think that was a viable thing. Was
No,
that no, or what was the reason you felt?
there were very few bands with females in Seattle. There were very few bands with females at all, and it wasn't until like the Riot Girl scene and Olympia and Bikini Kill and Bratmobile and those bands began to really become loud and out front and playing gigs and talking about it a lot, and with the more feminist push around music, that I think women started to feel more comfortable playing and stepping up and starting bands. It allowed that, and I think Mia did that too. Is like people saw Mia up there playing, and she was so genuine and real and honest that I can do that too if she can do it. And you ever see a performer like a musician or anyone doing anything in the arts, and it looks so easy, and it looks like it just comes out of them, and you're like, they make it seem like you can do it too. And to me, that's what punk rock was about. It's like anyone can do it. Anyone with something to say should and can form a band and have something to say loud, and do it in front of people that will listen. So I think Mia allowed other women to step up and front bands or start bands or play in bands. So by the time that band ended in '93, I think a significant shift had taken place.
You guys must have been pissed off because the music kicked ass. I mean, you should have been signed along with the other bands. Like,
well, I believe we
long
were
ago.
signed. We were signed to a couple of independent record labels.
Was Sub Pop one of the labels that?
Fat Mike from Fat Records, he wanted to sign us as his first band on his label, but we turned him down and signed to CZ Records, which had been like a guy that had worked at Sub Pop and started his own label and had pretty good track record. I think we were negotiating with Atlantic Records, which would be considered a major, one of the three majors, or four, and they apparently we were signed. We were about to be signed had we signed the contract because it was in the mail. We had just finished meetings with them on the day before she was murdered, and that was kind of in the works. We had talked to our lawyer who was negotiating a contract with Atlantic Records, and we would have had a career sort of set up for the next, I don't know, 11 records or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been a really great, interesting living.
Yeah, you met with Tim Summer of Atlantic Records, right? He had a meeting with you. Yeah. What was discussed in that meeting?
And he wanted to sign us. He said, what do you need? And we're like, well, we're going to get a lawyer to find out. But he said, oh, with you'll have money, you won't have to work, you'll be able to, travel and do shows and tour and make records, and you'll basically be an employee of Atlantic Records for as long as things work out. And we had the vibe at the time was like indie good, major bad, right? So a major record company, it was almost like selling out. That was the pinnacle of selling out, was going to a major label. Even Cobain talked about it a lot. So eventually the record company saw that doing it their way was not productive anymore, and that if bands wanted to, they could do it themselves just as well and make more money or be just as successful without a major record label. So major record labels really had to step up their promoting and just supporting bands that they signed, as opposed to just seeing which ones had a hit right off the bat and then dropping the rest, right? Or putting all their money into one or two artists like Bruce Springsteen or Madonna and forgetting about the other bands that are there, letting them flop. So that shift had happened, and we were really trying to decide, do we want to go with the major? Because we would have had a lot of opportunities at that point because our records were well received critically, all over the world. And it was probably a matter of time before you would have heard the Gits on, the radio everywhere.
Yeah. Funny story with Mia. Didn't she call her dad or something? She's like, I don't know. They're willing to pay for my meal. Should I?
She didn't think of it. Yeah, she ordered lunch when we got taken out to lunch by this record company, and she was afraid she didn't have enough money to pay for it. So she called her dad to try to get him to send her money, like off his credit card in the moment. And like, no, I think they're going to pay for it. That was
his response was great. He's like, don't worry, they're going to take care of it.
They're going to take care of it. Yeah.
Yeah. You guys played on bills with Beck, Nirvana, Mudhoney, Joan Jett, Bikini Kill, L7, among others. There's a great story in the book about you played, it was Nirvana, the Gits, Tad, and Crunchbird, a band I never heard of. Yeah. You're banned for life from the University of Washington campus. Do you remember why that? Yeah, what happened?
I think we just destroyed the dressing room, which was a classroom. We didn't know. It was actually, I'm going to throw Nirvana under the bus because they were the ones that were destroying everything. We were just sitting there. But,
the eraser fight, wasn't it? Kurt throwing an eraser at
Kurt and Chris chasing each other around the room and throwing, like, one time he took a whole bus tub and like full of ice and soda cans and just like chucked it at Kurt, who ducked and missed it, and like I think it like hit us partially, but it was just like they were just showing off and being silly.
What year would this be? Had they already come out with?
That would have been 1990.
Oh, 90. Okay.
14 Spirit, I think.
Got it. Yeah, he was sitting next to me, I think, and he was chatting with her, saying, "You guys are good."
Yeah, we were chatting for a bit.
Yeah,
got to know them a little bit, and then later on, after Mia died, they actually stepped up and volunteered and did a benefit show, which has just been really, it's just on YouTube now for the first time. And I remember it was an amazing little show that Kurt called me at home and said, we heard what happened. We're really sorry. And could we, do anything to help, like play? Because I had organized another show and with some other bands, smaller bands, and they asked if they could jump on that bill. And I was like, sure, if you want to, if you're on time. No, I didn't say that, but I was like, sure. And Courtney got on the line at the same time. I was like, who are you going to start making some demands about who, how the show should go and what time they should go on and when we could announce it to press. So I just was like, sure, whatever. And they showed up and set up and just played like it was they were a regular band playing a regular little show. But they kicked ass. They were really good. And at that point I was like, man, everything I was just I was a fan and devotee at that point.
Yeah, Kurt was a cool dude, huh? Down to
Yeah,
earth.
he's a really quiet guy. He's really quiet and private. And I think he could be a lot of different people. He could be a sweet guy. He could also not be, depending on who you were and his state of mind. And depression does a lot of things to people. And I think it didn't always have the best effect on Kurt.
What about Mia's lyrics? Where did she get inspiration from? You say she kept journals. So did she look for inspiration, or did it just come to her? She
had inspiration from her friends going through stuff around her, things that she went through, things that she had overcome. But it wasn't like poor, pitiful me lyrics. Her lyrics would talk about a situation abstractly, and then the bridge of the song might be some solution, and then the final verse might be how the total resolution of the problem. So she would write stories and like small, like little stories and chunks that you could kind of apply to stuff you're going through in your own life. And she had a way with doing that, like making it universal that way.
Yeah, she had a unique voice and a style, just the way that she would the phrasing over the beat, and just an emotionally raw, just kind of singing from deep down.
It seemed easy for her. It was amazing,
Yeah.
but she would actually work for weeks on the words and the phrasing. And she'd take a little cassette recorder and record a song that we would play instrumentally, and just listen to it over and over and over again, and like write lyrics, tear them up, write them over, start over. And she would pull from her journals bits, and because she was writing all the time, and she would pull songs out of her journal entries or use the words from her journal to tell the story that she wanted to tell.
So the songwriting process, would she come with lyrics? You guys would try to write something around the lyrics, or
we would usually write sometimes we'd write the songs without her there. Sometimes she'd be there and just sort of listen while we played and come up with a few words, or that would change and morph into something else. But it depended on just sort of the mood. Sometimes Andy would work with Mia privately, and they would do lyrics and play guitar together for hours and come up with something and then bring it to the band. Sometimes the whole band would jam for a while, and then Mia would hear it, record it, take it back to her room, listen to it, and work on it for a long time, and then finally bring lyrics back. Sometimes she'd have a finished song just like that. Sometimes it would take practicing over and over and over again. Depends. You could get into, like anyone. I got into a writer's slump, writer's block. What do you call it? Writer's block?
Yeah, writer's block.
For several months, I just couldn't write anything. And then, or sometimes it would take me a month and I would write one sentence. And that would be, I would write a whole chapter, but only one sentence would be good. So the rest I'd have to throw away. And sometimes I'd sit down in 5 minutes and write 2 chapters and it would be good, So it was like, you can never tell. It's just like when the muse speaks, you have to listen and hope that you have a pen.
As a writer, I know it's just, it sucks. You're just staring at the page, staring at a blank.
It's really lonely, It can be really lonely to be just sort of pulled up, like looking at a screen or a piece of paper for hours and not producing anything.
Yeah. How about the Gits most important song, Second Skin? Is someone wrote that's the most important song, and it was written in 30 minutes during a rehearsal, but you say not true.
I don't know. I think, I mean, it seemed like it because we got shut down by the cops because we were too loud.
Yeah.
That's garage, and we got shut down. So I think we knew the cops had been there, or someone had called, and I think we had a certain amount of time that we had. This could be wrong, but the way I can think of it now is like we only had so much time to practice, because we didn't have a space. So we're practicing in Matt's garage, and the cops are on their way, so we have to finish it up quickly. And for some reason, it got put out that way. But actually, I mean, that was just kind of we were at the peak of our powers pretty much when we wrote that song, and it was just we were all in a good mood. It was just flowing, and it was definitely written, put together in one afternoon at least.
And what is Mia singing about?
I have no idea. No, it was
Yeah.
um it was a song about essentially about overcoming adversity and resilience in essence. And I've had a lot of people who've come up to me privately and said that that song had meant something, had been the song that changed or saved their lives or kept them from.
Yes, you talk about that in the book,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, that
That
was when you went to the screening of the documentary and a few people came up to you.
Yeah, we were working on a documentary. We had about a 30-minute long black and white documentary, and we screened it at the Music Museum in Seattle. It's called the Pop Museum, I think, or something. But yeah, someone stood up during the Q&A and said that that song had saved their lives, and they were going to commit suicide, and that they had that song was queued up, and it came up when they were just about to do it, and they listened to it for a second, and then they decided not to. So just in that really direct way, it's like an example of how her songs meant a lot to people that didn't know her, which is a powerful thing.
Yeah, what a story.
Made it worth writing. Made it worth. That alone wasn't the only reason, but that certainly made me feel like what I was doing needed to be done. That she needed to be recognized as as the great that she was.
Yeah, and I want to ask about the dream that you had too, because this
Oh,
was on the morning that you heard the news. This is July 7th of 93. And
yeah,
you had awoken from a dream and she was in that dream.
yeah. It was a dream I had. It was I was after I was actually 10 years after she had been killed, and this was um I was at home. I pretty much had been trying to keep the investigation going, even though it had been so long. We needed to raise money because we had a private investigator hired that we needed to pay, and we had run out of money at that point. And I woke up one morning and I was feeling happy, and I decided to burn some CDs and send them to my friends because records were out of print. And I thought, gosh, this music's still good. People should hear it. And I was burning the CDs when that dream I remembered my dream had been that we had met at on a park bench somewhere, and she had said not to worry, that she was fine, that she was playing jazz music, singing jazz in like underground clubs in New York or something. And I was like, oh, that's great. Nice to see you. And we said goodbye. She said not to worry. It was a very vivid dream, and I hadn't dreamt about her much at all. So she appeared in my dream, and then that day the phone rang that very afternoon, and someone said, you don't know me, but I work for the Miami Herald, and I have on good authority that they have someone in custody who killed your friend. And I'm like, who is this? This can't be true. And it was true. And she sent proof, and then the phone started to ring, and the press was calling, and they extradited this guy from Miami, from the Florida Keys, actually, as far away from Seattle as he could get, and brought him back. And the weird thing is that I was doing my internship for graduate school at the public defender's office, who was going to defend him. I was working there.
Wow.
I had a pass to go into the jail to see people, and that really sent me spinning about what I could do, how I could approach this, what I would say to this person, or what I could do to this person, and that was difficult to say the least. So that was tough. I just went straight over to Andy's house, and we waited until we had proof, and then we were just sort of in disbelief. And I thought, maybe this will change things for the better. Everything will be better. And it changed things, but it made things really rough for a while too.
Just the acceptance of like,
Well, there was a trial, and there was the whole idea that he might not be convicted. He'd be let
oh
go
yeah, yeah.
because he was convicted on the smallest amount of DNA evidence ever used to convict someone. The evidence was OJ had gotten off on buckets of DNA blood, right? DNA from blood, buckets of it. This sample was so small that had never been used in court before, and it was from saliva from someone's teeth that they took the DNA that convicted him,
Yeah, it
and
was a
that was
recent development too. A DNA. It was a development that had
DNA. It
just.
cost a lot of money to analyze DNA, and they thought they had pretty much no evidence from the scene of the crime, but in that case, the medical examiner had saved this DNA 10 years prior to DNA ever even being before the genome was analyzed like the human genome. Um, and it was so he had the foresight to save this DNA evidence that had never been used in court before 10 years prior to it being used in court. And then it was like right in that during that year that DNA was uh was able to be analyzed in such a small amount to make a match with somebody, and they did.
Hmm. Well,
So
but I don't think that dream was a coincidence. You think about
yeah,
that
it made me
stuff.
really think about that. I mean, there was a lot of I can go into my theories on it, but
Yeah.
I don't want to sound crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Like my dad passed a few years ago, and there are things that have happened, like the 2 year anniversary of his passing. A few things I was like, I don't think that's a coincidence. You just
Yeah,
you could
it's
try to ignore those things, but if they keep happening, you're like, yeah, maybe there is something to it.
yeah, you can't explain it. Some things can't be. Um,
Yeah.
and I just try to explain the book. I try to explain what was so good about me as a singer and as an artist and as a performer. Why she was such an amazing friend to the people that knew her, and basically what the world lost when she died, and that was the main flux of the book.
Well, fortunately, Spotify has the music on there. I'm sure you know, so it's
Yeah,
there. People can go
it's
and
there.
listen. YouTube, it's there. So that's the good thing. It's not like you have to search hard.
No, it wasn't so long ago. It wasn't so long ago that you would have to go to a brick and mortar store and find a used record and take it home and get a turntable and listen to it. Wasn't that long ago. And but that really kept us going. I think after Mia was killed, just personally, I think it having the music and trying to get the music out there and re-releasing the records was kind of a part of the mission that gave us something to think about and do that was positive. Those pro music, those pro life, if you will, and like we wanted to keep the name alive. I did anyway.
Well, there are four altogether now. People can get. There's the first two studio albums. Kings and Queens would have been
The first, yeah,
music
it was first
recorded
demo.
before the first.
We did it in a
You know.
studio, but it was considered a demo when it came out as a 17 song. I thought it was a complete album. I think it was a great album. Works together. It's just recorded live to two tracks. And then the two other studio records came out in 92 and 90 or 93 and 94 posthumously. The second one, the third
And
one.
Seafish Louisville. That's a
That was a
compilation.
compilation of B-sides and singles and a
Okay.
couple and live stuff with
Okay.
maybe one or two unreleased songs. But the records are getting re-released on Sub Pop Records very soon.
That's good. You got a
Yes.
favorite song, favorite moment, musical
I like
moment from Mia?
I have different songs that I enjoy, but I think the first song on the first record on our second record actually, Frenching the Bully, the first song on there is my favorite. It's called Absinthe, and just has so many twists and turns, and it's complete with a drum solo, a bass solo. It's kind of like 3 minutes of insanity that I think exemplifies everything we were capable of musically.
Yeah.
First song on this on the first side. Yeah.
Was it hard? How long did it take for you to get to? Because there's that what if. There's we were so close. What to come to terms with that?
What do you mean?
Well, like if she was still with us, what could have been. It's hard not to
Yeah,
think
they
about
asked me
that,
that
right?
on NPR Wednesday. Like, where
Yeah.
would they be now? And I think we'd be still playing. I think we probably had made quite a few records. And I saw the band X the other month at playing. They do like an annual Christmas show or a couple of shows around Christmas time in the Bay Area. And they were so good, and they just showed up in whatever they were wearing that day and just threw down and played their set. And I was dancing. I had a great time. And I thought about it, gosh, and they're 10, 15 years older than we are. And I thought, damn, man, that could be us. That could be us doing like an annual Christmas show when we're low on money at the end of the year, We could be doing this and having, it be packed at a 2,000, 4,000 seat venue for the rest of our lives, man. And I admire and I envy bands that can do that, that can get together still and play, even if they haven't been functional, a touring band for years and years. I always love to see bands that I love, get together years later. And
Yeah.
oftentimes they're better musicians and, from playing for so many years.
I want to ask you about the letters that Mia wrote to you, and you
Mm.
put them in the book.
Yeah,
And I love it because it's an old school typewriter she used,
she did.
right?
She wrote
Yeah.
lyrics, letters to
From
people on an old school typewriter.
yeah, this goes
Not
back
even
to
like
'89.
a
Yeah.
manual typewriter. Like,
Yeah. I just want to read very quickly. Read the first letter begins with quote, "Dear Steve, I very much did get your letter, and on a day I needed it very badly. I told myself I needed to get some heartful soul from someone personal to me today. I was trying to seek my own strength, but I wanted to hear someone not just talking at me, but telling me they're on my side." Could you share a little bit of what's behind that letter, and why you
uh,
included that in the other letter in the book? I love
when
it.
we were in college, that was hard. It was a hard decision to put that in or not. But I decided to do it because it just showed the closeness of our friendship as opposed to like us being lovers or something, which we weren't. So it was and just how personable she was and where her mind was at and how she communicated. Um, that's why I think a lot of times we were started the band and then we were at a college that you'd spend 6 months on campus a year and then 6 months off campus. So the only way we had of communicating back in the day, in those days, was through letters and phone calls, which were very expensive to call long distance. So we wrote letters back and forth, and I love to write, and she liked to write, so we would write letters back and forth. I would write with the other guys as well. But she would be spending time doing an internship or a co-op, they called it, away from the campus, and I might be on campus, and so we'd write back and forth. Remember, one year I worked in Florida. I went to Florida and worked as a social worker for 6 months as one of my internships, and she was back in Ohio, and so we wrote. I think that letter was written. I don't know, maybe I was in Europe. I think I was in Europe at the time, studying in Europe, and she was back in the States somewhere, and so we would write back and forth. The campus of Antioch being like the hub for our PO boxes and letters if we were traveling to pick up stuff there. So yeah, we were apart a lot of times. The first 3 years of the band, we were probably only together in the same town for a year and a half of it, or a year total.
Yeah, I think
Um,
I'm glad you put those letters in. It just shows it's a personal touch to it, and it just shows the side of her that that
I
nobody
didn't
knows it, and
really
it's you could
expose.
tell. Did you? It looks a little beat. It's got the fold marks in it, and you
Yeah, that's just out of my pocket, I think.
7/22/89, July 22nd of '89, and then the
Nice.
other one is January 23rd of '89.
One she gave me right upon when I was graduating as a graduation present, sort of just a letter. She rushed into town and handed that to me and then took off again. I don't know. Yeah, remember exactly what happened. And then 6 months later, we'd meet in Seattle and start going as a band.
Well, it's the book. It took many years. It's out, and what's cool about a book, somebody could discover the band a year from now, a day from now, 10 years
Yeah.
from now. These books are out there; they never go away.
Hopefully it'll be in a library too.
Yeah. So people should go out and get it. It's out depending on when you're listening to this, August 13th. So it's tomorrow as far as when we're recording. Mia Zapata and the Gits, a story of art, rock, and revolution, out through Firo Books. And can people find you online if they want to reach out to you?
Yeah, there's boy, I haven't set up my social media, but there's a website, it's just stevemoriarty.org. They could reach me at stevemoriarty.org. Yeah,
Got
that'd
it.
be great.
Now, and musically, what are you up to? Do you still write,
I
record
play more
music?
now than ever, actually, and
Cool.
playing two or three bands. I play in a cumbia band, which is a kind of a form of it's a Colombian dance music, strangely. So it's like a Latin rock, psychedelic rock sort of thing. The band's called Malagrena, which means really bad hair. And then I play in a duet, like I play synthesizer and drums in a sort of a fusion duet, kind of a noise fusion rock duet called TV 1984. And I should send you some music to include on your
Oh,
if
I
you
would
want.
love to. Yeah. TV 1984. What a cool name. I
Thanks.
love that name. I
Yeah,
love it.
it's just TV 1980. I don't know why, but it was a good year for TV, I guess.
So, and then what is the third band, right? You said three bands here?
Three bands. Oh, I was in a band called Shotwell, which is like a sort of um, a punk, kind of a punk, political oriented punk band out of San Francisco. They've been around since '93 or so. I toured with them in the '90s, and they asked me to come back and do it. So I came back and produced a record of theirs. I've been producing albums too, and I produced a band called Cosmic Kitten, which is a Los Angeles band, young band, and uh, produce various records for people and help people with drum tracks and recording and stuff too.
That's
But
awesome.
I
Yeah.
still play every weekend, every rehearse all the time, and yeah.
Cool. I'm happy to hear that, man. It was great to talk to you, and congratulations on the book. And people should go out and get the book, and people should go out and listen to the music of the Gits.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I really appreciate it.